everyone, welcome into Pushing the Limits. This week I have my good friend and one of the greatest regenerative medicine specialists of all times, known as the GOAT, Dr. Elizabeth Yurth from the Boulder Longevity Institute. And today we are talking about immunosenescence and the aging of the immune system and how this impacts your health. And this is not just for older people, but anyone who is dealing with an immune crisis, whether you're dealing with something like autoimmune diseases or you've had a viral infection recently that you're dealing with. This is an episode for you. We go into our formulation from Aevum Labs that we've been working on together for the last 2 years and how that impacts the aging of the immune system, or slowing it and reversing the aging of the immune system, and why we look at the 1000 Immunomes project. You may recall a couple of months ago, I did an episode with Dr. David Furman from Stanford University and the Buck Institute on the 1000 Immunomes project, which is the longest immune study on humans ever, in 15 years of research that's gone into this. And what they've really discovered is that the immune system is at the base of all the hallmarks of aging. It affects all the hallmarks of aging. And so with our formulation, we have gone after immunosenescence as the key to foundational health. So we will be talking through some of the ingredients that we've chosen to put into this formulation, how immunosenescence works to, over time deteriorate your body and your immune system, and what happens and how that affects gut health and cellular health as well. So this is really jam-packed with absolutely amazing information. And I hope that you'll really enjoy this. And I really want you to go and try this product out, Rejuvenate. You can go over to my website, lisatamati.com, and hit the shop button and just type in the search bar Aevum, A-E-V-U-M, and you'll come up with Aevum, the product. Our product Rejuvenate is the flagship product. Aevum is the name of the company, Aevum Labs. Or you can go to aevumlabs.co.nz and dig into the science and find out the whole story behind it, if after today you haven't got enough. And I can tell you we'll be covering a lot of ground. So without further ado, now over to Dr. Elizabeth Yurth of the Boulder Longevity Institute. Well, hey everyone, and welcome to Pushing the Limits. Fantastic to have you with me today. I have my dear friend, the most amazing GOAT, she's known, the greatest of all times. I've heard that being said on a few podcasts lately. Dr. Elizabeth Yurth. Betsy, welcome to the show. It's fabulous to have you.
Thanks, Lise. Always good to be here with you.
Yeah, we just love hanging out together.
That's our problem. We talk a little too much, and
then we go, oh, we're meant to be recording a podcast. Oh, that's right.
which is bringing us together for this podcast, right?
Is our passion. So Dr. Yurth, tell us a little bit, just before we get into the meat and potatoes of what we're going to be talking about today, which is immunosenescence and the aging immune system and how to correct the immune system. Give us just the 1 minute version, because people probably have heard me rabbit on about you for the last few years and they know you very well from all their podcasts, but just a 1 minute version of who and where you are.
Yeah, so I, as a lot of your listeners may already know, having heard me from other places, I kind of got into this world very early on. Went back when our A4M, which is now, multiple thousands of people, was about 300 people in a room. And I got it through a little bit of a roundabout way because I did orthopedics, and then realized that I was honestly just sort of patching people back together and not really healing anybody. And so I really started getting interested in more, how do I make the body healthy, and then people will heal. So that's what kind of got me down this pathway. And then as I got more and more into the functional medicine world, I actually started to get, much like I did with traditional medicine, a little bit like, all functional medicine doctors are now kind of doing these just protocols to things, and happen to stumble more into the cellular medicine world. Let's look at biochemical pathways. Let's look at exactly what's going awry at a cell level, and then try and fix those pathways, as opposed to trying to say, let's look at organ systems or root causes of disease. Let's look at the cell, because every disease is going to come back to a dysfunction of the cell. So I went through all the fellowship training, with anti-aging longevity medicine, did an epigenomic fellowship, and then really got into doing cellular research, and we sort of started working on this whole cellular medicine fellowship. So that's what I'm in faculty now with Seed Scientific Research and Performance, where we actually teach cell medicine, which is a little bit tedious for some people because you got to learn pathways and understand pathways. But it's kind of how to me, it's the root of the root cause. So just like what we're going to talk about, I think today, when we look at what is the real root cause of aging, because people have all these different things that cause aging, the root cause is still going to come down to one thing. And that's the same thing true. It really starts at the cell and what goes wrong at the cell. So that's kind of my entry into this world, and where I think the people who have been trained like I have, who are still a pretty small number of us, are probably going to be the way we really change medicine, is to look at diseases at a cell level and not at a functional level or an organ system level, but really at a cellular level.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've the founder of the Boulder Longevity Institute, which is in Colorado, right, and the Boulder Longevity Boulder Academy, which I want to encourage everybody to go and join. This is the best education. It's a lay education, but it's a lot of doctors in there because it's absolutely amazing. And I just wait every month for your Q&As to come out, because
they're so fun, aren't they? They're so
amazing.
The people ask such amazing questions. I'm like blown away. Yeah, you guys, it's called Human Optimization Academy. You go to bli.academy. You can join there. We do a bunch of webinars. I analyze studies, but the best things really are these monthly Q&As where people can send in questions. And because it is a really smart group of people who really want to learn cells, the questions are, bar none, you will learn more in those, I think, than anywhere you go. And we have physicians, we have all sorts of health practitioners, athletic trainers involved in that, and it's getting bigger and bigger. And I will tell you, the questions challenge me. Sometimes I'm just like, wow. So those are really fun. Yeah, you guys should join. It really is designed to be sort of accessible information for any of us. You have to sort of want to learn, but it's accessible information from anybody. You don't have to have a big medical degree or all of the training that Lisa has. You just basically have to have a desire to learn.
Yeah, it is the best education. It is my number one go-to place for everything. So go and check that Human Optimization Academy out. And today, Betsy, we're going to be talking about the immune system as the key to slowing the aging down. So the immune system is what goes awry, and we get this thing called immunosenescence. Can you explain what immunosenescence and why is it the key to health span?
So exactly. I think when you look at all these different tests that we're doing that look at what your biologic age is, most of them are based on things like glycation end products. So there's glycan age, which looks like glycation. You've got looking at altered methylation patterns that go on with aging. Really, all of these things, or we look at cellular autophagy that starts to go awry. All of those things still go back to the first thing that goes wrong is our immune surveillance fails. Because for anything else to go wrong, our immune system has to first not be on guard. Our immune systems are very astute at stopping cancer, at stopping viruses, at preventing ourselves from having all these bad things happen, changing methylation patterns. But our immune systems are pretty taxed. And this can start happening at a very young age. Because especially now, we have too many insults.
Yeah.
So our immune system can only take in so much. And if now I have, virus after virus, you have Epstein-Barr and CMV and every, cold virus and herpes viruses, everybody has had a herpes virus, because herpes simplex 1 or herpes simplex 2, and now COVID. If you look at the viral insults, many of these viruses, which don't ever go away, right? Epstein-Barr never goes away. Herpes viruses never go away. COVID likely never goes away. These are viruses that stay in our system. They stay contained. So our immune system has to work to keep these viruses under control. It's a lot of work for our immune system. And the more they have to do that, the more viruses they have to contain, the less available they're going to be to stop the cancer cell that's starting to circulate. So that increased inflammatory properties because of all these exposures to things. And then you've got the exposures to toxins too. So now the toxins that our body has to sort of react to, glyphosates, which are in, you guys not so bad as we are here in the US.
Oh yeah, it's bad. It's bad.
Which are certainly, everywhere. And since unfortunately chemicals are sprayed on, even organic foods get affected by chemicals because of rainwater wash down. So we have those insults. And the next thing that happens, unfortunately, so that's all part of the immune senescence. But what else besides all the insult that now our immune system feels like, I'm getting overwhelmed here. I'm getting overwhelmed here. But what else overwhelms our immune system? Well, partly it's just age in general. So remember, when we're young, we have a really nice built-in army, and that's our thymus gland. So our thymus gland is what's educating. It's a giant gland in our chest. If you do an X-ray of a baby, they have this mass in their chest. It looks like a huge tumor in their chest. It's a big mass in their chest. That's their thymus gland. It's giant. And it's educating all the immune system what to do, to attack this, don't attack this. So don't attack self. Attack self. I have autoimmune disease. My goal is to attack the cancer cells that are circulating or the viruses that are there, make antibodies. So the thymus gland keeps our immune systems really hardy. It actually starts to turn into a more fatty infiltrate at about puberty. So very young.
Yeah, really young.
So really at puberty, you're at your best. It starts to decline. By the time you're in your 60s like me, now you don't have really much thymic function at all. It is just a little fatty nodule that's not really doing anything. So now I've lost a large regulator of my immune system. So it's much easier as we get older and we don't have that thymic function for our immune systems to get confused. Now they start reacting to all these viruses or vaccines, and they start getting confused and start attacking me. And hence we're seeing a rash of autoimmune disease, be that we're seeing arthritises or lupus diseases or a host that we probably can't even put a name to, but the body attacking itself. And so we know that if we have this taxed immune system and now we have lots of things to retrain it, that's going to be dysfunction. And then the other big piece that happens is, remember that one of the biggest players in our immune system is what? Our gut, right?
Yep.
So if we look at what happens, so the gut is actually 70 to 80% of our immune system. So it's huge. It is the largest organ of your immune system, much more than your thymus gland, much more than your bone marrow. It is the largest organ of your immune system. But our gut is pretty, it's pretty
as well
by a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
So again, we get exposed to bad foods, we get exposed to chemicals, we get given antibiotics, which are pretty hard to never get an antibiotic, right? You know, and antibiotics have saved lives. I'm not going to say you don't need antibiotics. You've got chemotherapeutic agents, you have antibiotics, you have a lot of other medications, you know, including some of the antihypertensive, anti-epileptic drugs that affect gut health. So now, once I've affected gut health, what happens? Well, I've disturbed this well-balanced microbiome, and that well-balanced microbiome is one of the things that's controlling the integrity of the gut. So now I've got that leaky gut, right? Now I don't have good tight junctions in the gut. So now any pathogens that do get in are exposed much more than they should be to our blood and our immune systems. So now our immune systems, things that wouldn't even be exposed to it if I had nice tight junctions in my gut. So basically, the gut is going to be probably above all these other things at trying to fix the immune system. And so all those insults, you know, the longer I live, the more I've been exposed to things, the more antibiotics I've had, the more viruses I've had, the more my gut has been taxed by things, the more, you know, that I got some E. coli infection, or parasite, exactly, or, you know, or mold exposure. So when you look at inflammaging or immune aging, that can happen even at a young age. Yeah, I see 20-year-olds, right, who have really bad immune systems because, you know, they're already starting to decline in immune function, and maybe they got 3 different viruses in a row, and then they got mold exposure. So that, don't think of immune aging as just an old person disease. That doesn't happen just like when you turn 50, all of a sudden your immune system starts aging. Your immune system really starts aging, you know, probably at puberty, maybe even earlier than that, right? We start getting some immune dysfunction going. But I would say at puberty, meaning, you know, at the age of 13, 15, you're starting to, you know, see the immune system suffer a little bit. You know, so I think that the hard thing here is we really can't, you know, how do we address this? Because people look at all these different tests and they say, okay, we can do this to help the liver, and I can do this to help my brain, and I can do this to, you know, so we give GLP-1 agonists because they're really good for the brain and they're really good for the heart. And we, you know, and we're all taking these host of supplements that are supporting my kidney function and my liver function, all those things. And I don't think we're doing a very good job as physicians or as just people at changing the one thing that we really need to pay more attention to. And that's the gut. And I know we're paying a lot more attention to the gut. People are all talking about the gut microbiome. So what are people doing? Well, they're throwing a bunch of probiotics into the mix. The problem with probiotics is they really aren't fixing anything. If I have a leaky gut and an unhealthy gut environment, those probiotics don't even survive, honestly. You're better off taking prebiotics, which are sort of feeding the good bacteria and trying to recreate a good environment, trying to create a good environment. But now, how do we repair the damaged tight junctions? How do we make this gut integrity the way it was when I was young? There's not a lot of ways to do that. And we're going to talk about, maybe we've stumbled on a way to do that.
Yeah.
That would be, really important. There's a Dr. David Furman, who I think you've talked to or are going to talk to, who runs a project out of Buck Institute called the 1000 Immunome Project. And they actually have developed this age test called iAge. It's for inflammatory age, but it really is also immune age. And what they really are saying is that every disease in the book does come back down to immune age. And I don't see that, that people are focusing on that, where they should. I don't think that whole process is I think it's being ignored a lot. And I think largely because we don't exactly know what to do, except trying to tell people, yes, eat a high fiber diet, eat fermented foods, exercise, all those good things. Those are probably still not going to replace a lot of the pieces. I can't give you a new thymus gland. I can't all of a sudden make your tight junctions all better in your gut after they've been injured a whole bunch. So I think that you have to sort of look at even young people probably need to be focusing a little bit more on that, because that's what started your decline.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And the 1000 Immunomes project. So this is a project that Stanford and Buck Institute have been running for the last few years, and they're using data and AI and big data sets to sort of look at what are the immune factors that we can actually measure that will actually indicate what is going when your immune system's going awry. So they've discovered a whole lot of different factors, like tumor necrosis factor alpha and IL-6 and CRP and CXCL9, especially, which we'll get into later, into that one in particular. But just coming back to that whole immune piece, as you've said, is the key factor. So instead of going after all the 12 hallmarks of aging that we now, have these 12 hallmarks of aging, and there seems to be more at it all the time. But if we actually look at the basis, it's the immune system, because all of the things are going to be
there. And then the 12 hallmarks of aging are here. So let's work here, and we're going to affect all those things without adding 1,000 more supplements to affect every one of those 12 hallmarks of aging. Now we can address the immune system and hopefully address all of those things secondarily. And you're not taking 50 supplements, you're taking, one or two things.
And what you said there about the barriers, like you talked about the gut barrier, but actually it's not even just the gut barrier.
Yeah, you're right.
There's barriers right throughout the body, our reproductive tract, our eyes, even our lungs, our cardiovascular, all of these interfaces where the outside of the body has an interface with the inside of the body, has an army of, IgA and IgG and all of these immunoglobulins at the border of the fort, if you like, because if you think about the lining of your gut, the lining of your lungs, all of these things are the interface with the outside world. So if this was your castle, where would you put the soldiers? You'd put them at the gates, right? You'd put them at the wall. So
that's a great, I love that. The brain too, right? The same thing with the brain. If we can keep these pathogens away from the brain, we know now we've linked, for instance, neurodegenerative diseases to things like herpes viruses, lymphomas to Epstein-Barr virus. So you're right. If we could stop the entry zone, if we could improve the blood-brain barrier, if we could improve the gut integrity, if we can improve the integrity of the lung mucosa. Now, when I breathe in a pathogen, it doesn't have a route to start this immune process. Yeah. So I love that analogy of put your soldiers at the gate.
But I love that. I think that's a fort. And if you picture the, like the gut microbiome, for example, or the gut barrier is having different layers. You've got your actual physical layer, that one sort of cell thick endothelial lining. You've got your actual immunoglobulins. You've got your microbiome, which is actually there. And you've got your mucosa, your mucous membranes. And in the mucous membranes, you talk about with when you do microbiome testing, we look at secretory IgA, and if that's low, then we know that you're, when the bugs are coming in on your food with the pathogens, you're not going to be able to trap them in that mucus and get them gone, dealt with if you've got low secretory IgA. So we're always looking for ways to improve that mucosa, and that's, as you said, prebiotics is a big factor in there, because it actually is the fiber matrix of the mucosa,
Right.
and it's feeding the good bacteria, and so understanding that, number one, the immune system is the key that we need to be going after. Number two, a big factor of that is the microbiome and the gut health, right? That is connected to that. And number three is the barriers to entry in all of the orifices of the body, basically from your vagina to your eyes to
Right.
your lungs. All of
Right.
these areas need to
think
be
of all these areas
strengthened.
where things can enter into our body.
Yeah. And so how do we do that, Betsy? Like, what can we do to target some of these things? What have you used in your practice?
I think that in my practice, we sort of look at, okay, well, if I try to address things like the thymus gland, then we can use bioregular peptides or thymosin alpha-1. So some of the thymic peptides can sort of improve that thymic function. It's hard to improve thymic function short of using things like bioregulators, things that actually give you back what the thymus gland is not making, because I can't regenerate a thymus gland yet. Maybe we'll be able to at some point. We're certainly moving down that road that we can regenerate some of these organs, right? If you're in France, you eat sweetbreads because it's eating thymus gland, but that probably doesn't work so well. Probably a lot of those are just digested. So if you can use things that are bioregulators, there's thymogen, there's bioregulator peptides that are thymic peptides that are bioregulators to help improve thymic function. Will that be one of the keys, since we need to improve the thymus gland? And then, where do I look when I'm looking at gut health, aside from all the things we talked about, right? Is eating a high protein, lower carb diet, eating a lot of fiber, making sure you're getting fermented foods, make sure you're exercising, all those things you guys know. But if you look at how we're made, where does the gut first get its health? And that's from, so if we naturally want to do this the way our bodies were designed to, it's from colostrum, right? The very first fluid that's produced from the mammary glands of females right after birth, right? Immediately after birth. It's the reason it's so important, even if you're not going to nurse your baby, that they suck on your breast, is that colostrum that's produced is it provides all this passive immunity to the fetus. So basically, humans actually have the ability to get some antibodies from the placenta that pass from the mother to the baby, so they get some antibodies. Some other animals, like cows, actually don't. So bovine colostrum is actually really powerful, because all the baby cow's immune system comes from the colostrum itself. Yeah. Wow. And so colostrum is hugely protective. And one of the ways it's doing that is by getting the gut healthy immediately. It's also full of, cytokines, and, so both pro-inflammatory cytokines and anti-inflammatory cytokines that are immune modulating agents. You don't want to just have anti-inflammatory. You want a combination of both. You want to get the immune system a little bit stimulated with the pro-inflammatory things, but then you want the anti-inflammatory to calm it back down. So you've got, cytokines, you've got immunoglobulin A, immunoglobulin G. So you've got all of these immunoglobulins. You've got growth factors. You have antimicrobial compounds. You have some of the maternal immune cells. So actually, there's actually immune cells, some of the T cells that are actually in, and B cells that are in colostrum that come from the mother. So we know that supportive properties of colostrum are huge, and also to repairing the gut. So one of the things we know colostrum does also is it contains some ingredients that actually are healing to the tight junctions of the gut, so we can actually repair the gut. The infant's not born with a very mature gut.
No,
so
it's permeable.
Yeah, it's super permeable, exactly, just like our guts after they've been insulted. Exactly. And so if we look at I think it's always best to look at, the body was very cleverly designed by somebody, and that clever design, if we go back to our basics of, well, how did the body do this? How were we meant to do this? I think colostrum's a really cool way of doing that, right? Yeah. So it contains so many amazing things that I think we know very well that there's studies, actually, the studies that showed it was better than pharmaceutical drugs in a number of clinical applications, that it actually had better immune properties than vaccines for a number of diseases.
Yeah, like three
You know,
times the flu,
yeah,
like three
yeah,
times
for
more
flu
effective
for
than the flu
flu, yeah,
vaccine. Yeah, to
yeah.
stop it. Yeah,
So upper respiratory illness is super
yeah,
protective for us. So yeah, so I think that why don't we try and do this in a natural way, the way the body does? And because bovine colostrum is even more potent than ours, then uh, then that would be the way to go. But then
yeah.
you and I were talking a while back, and we sort of got into this conversation about all this and said, well, okay, so it's got all this cool stuff, right? But what if
Mm,
we could take the cool stuff out of it
mm.
and and
Magnify
and yeah, just have the cool stuff, right? And not have any of the other stuff in there, because there's a lot of things in there that we don't need. So
Yeah, the
it's
fat and the lactose and the all the protein, which is
yeah,
good, but you don't want
but right,
tons of
you
it.
don't need to overwhelm your system with all that. And so if we could just take all the really cool magic out of it, right? So I always sort of picture it as, okay, I can only, if I have ping pong balls full of sand, I can only take in so many ping pong balls, but I could fill up a lot of sand. So if I could take the sand out of the colostrum, if I could take those bioactive particles out of the colostrum, wouldn't that be cool? And
Mm.
that's kind of got us down the road of looking for, does that exist? Is there some way to do that? Is there a way to actually do it? And you, through some of your relationships, kind of stumbled onto this company Quantec, who had found that they could actually isolate these bioactive proteins, these bioactive components from the colostrum extracts, right, from the serum colostrum,
Yep.
and
Serum.
come
Yep.
up with this from the serum, and come up with this product that they call IDP, or immune defense protein, and it contained significantly more than the colostrum itself. So if I take a scoop of colostrum, this would be like if I took 50 scoops of the colostrum,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
bioactive components that were in there. Um,
Yeah.
and so we tried to get our hands on this product, right? It's not really widely available. It's nowhere in the US, and pretty, and not particularly distributed anywhere. So that ingredient of IDP really is, I think, whereas colostrum is this sort of one-dimensional story,
Mm.
now
That's
we've got
the
this pure bioactive ingredient that doesn't have any of the casein or the lactose or the fat, and that this sort of the synergistic effect of all these bioactives put together. And you can also you can test, whereas different colostrum is going to have different bioactive ingredients. It's going to depend on the source where you got it from. It's going to always be different. It's not, there's no way to say, okay, this always has this ingredients in it. But you can actually do that with the IDP, because you
Yeah.
can actually now test these and say, okay, this has this amount of these bioactive proteins in it. Because with serum protein electrophoresis, you can identify each of those and say, yes, we can say this has this much of the
Which
of
is
that.
fabulous, right? Because when we've been able to standardize it and make sure that it is each
Right.
batch
It's
is
that's the product
bioactive,
you're getting.
it is 100% what you're getting. And the IDP actually comes from the whey. So it's a suite of 50 bioactive molecules that actually work in synergy together. So the way Quantec were doing this, and I have interviewed Dr. Rod Clackham a couple of times, the founder of Quantec, and they were actually looking at lactoferrin. So this was a lactoferrin story, and lactoferrin has been known for a long time to have
Right. Like, I'm sure a lot of your listeners know about lactoferrin and its health benefits,
huge,
which is huge,
yeah,
right?
which is
That's
huge. Yeah, it's really big. And then they started to purify the lactoferrin, thinking that they'd make it stronger and better quality lactoferrin, right? And they actually found that when they purified it, the more they purified it, the less activity it had, the less bioactivity it had. And then they were like, huh? Why, it should be getting stronger. But what they discovered in that journey was that it was the 50 bioactives working in synergy. And we see this a lot in nature, right? When we
right.
take, sometimes it's good to take an extract out of something, but when it's like the spermidine story, like spermidine,
Right.
you're a huge fan, I'm a huge fan of, and spermidine is fabulous. But when I looked at putting spermidine into different formulations, we were looking at synthetic versus the natural spermidine, and the natural spermidine had a little bit of putrescine and a little bit of spermine in it.
Right.
Yeah,
It's a
and
full polyamine complex, and they found that was so much more effective.
yeah,
Exactly what you're saying here. You need the synergy of all these components together. And when you tried to isolate it down to one component, its efficacy was markedly decreased.
yeah,
So you kind of consider like, okay, you have these, you've got milk, and then lactoferrin, and now IDP, which is
third generation.
third generation of that.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is that you can't really, you can extract these bioactives from pasteurized skim milk with really very minimal heat. So there's very few colostrum products that actually are using some heat to extract the colostrum.
Yeah.
And so they
lose their bioactivity.
They lose the bioactivity, right? Yeah. So, and so we know that by not using heat to extract these bioactives, we're keeping them. And again, I really appreciate that I could write to the company and say, show me the batch of how much bioactives in this, and they can, for each batch, show you what's in it. There's no way you can do that with colostrum. It's absolutely impossible, because no batch is going to be exactly the same, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's just not. It's impossible.
And you need to know where it's coming from, and the quality of the cows, and the grass fed and all of that sort of stuff, and that this is coming from New Zealand. New Zealand has some very strict laws in that regard, and the quality of the product is really high, right? So you're starting off with a good product. Yeah,
and I think people forget about that, right? They buy all their organic groceries and their organic milk and things like that, and then they go and they buy some colostrum, and they don't really look, where did that come from? Because more than anything else, that's going to even have a condensed amount of any impurities or toxins in it than if I drank the non-organic milk from, a non-grass-fed cow or whatever. It's really hard here in the US, quite honestly, to get a really quality milk. I actually use, the thing about milk is you're not taking in a ton of one time, but if you're looking at whey protein or then colostrum, or then it's next thing IDP, you're getting a lot, because now we're condensing everything down. It's like the whey protein I use is only from a New Zealand extract, whey, because because those cows are grass fed, much more pure. There's less toxins. There's much more strict regulations on farming there than there is here, even organic farms. So I think that is really key. And I think people forget that when they're buying products. Where did this actually come from? I see people all the time, they buy their organic whey protein. Even organic whey protein actually probably has tons of toxins in it. So that's why we use when I'm using a whey protein, and I still will use whey protein, even if I get my hands on this product, that has an IDP, then I will still use a whey protein, because it has there's advantages. I get the amino acids. I want all that complex. There's still other, right? I'm getting the protein source. So it's not like this is, but now I'm getting a condensed form of all those things that I need to support my immune system.
Yeah, and it's that bioactive part of it, right? With whey, you're getting the protein, you're getting the alpha lac and the beta lac and the amino acids, and they're doing good things in your body, and they're helping you build muscle and so on and so forth. But they're not actually the bioactives that are actually helping your immune system. So this is the difference between having a whey protein and with IDP, it's 10 liters of milk to get 1 gram of IDP, right? So you'd have to drink a shitload.
A lot of milk, right?
And then you're going to get the fat and the sugar and the all the other things that come in milk.
Right.
So this is like a superfood. And if you think of, going back to the colostrum story, the colostrum is nature's evolutionary superfood. I don't like using that word because it's overused, but it is the word.
But it truly is.
But it is, because this is what we give our most vulnerable, like our babies who have no immune system, or bugger all of an immune system, and very poor, barriers. This is what nature provided to speed up the process of development, of organ development and brain development and everything else. And they've shown that even talking about breastfed infants versus infants that haven't had colostrum, especially, and breastfed, that they are, their entire lives, they are prone to more.
Yeah, their immune systems are not as good. Their gut is not as healthy. And when that secondarily is affecting their brain function, and that's because, that we go back to that repairing the gut integrity, that this is what gets that gut integrity repaired too. So whether it's an infant who's born with poor gut integrity, or us who have developed poor gut integrity, we're going to repair that by using these bioactive ingredients. And you were talking to me about a lot of the importance of a lot of these bioactives is not just even for the infant, but actually for the mother itself, right? That the direct effect of these immune defense proteins on the
The
maternal
health
health
of the
is
mother. Yeah.
critical,
Yep. Yeah.
right? That
Yep.
that that there's a
Yeah.
big piece there. So, so these are that powerful. They are actually keeping the mother from getting sick, giving the baby it's full. Again, in a cow, it's the full immune system. They had to get everything there. It's what got their immune system there. It's what kept their immune system healthy. So you have to look at wow, what is the potency now to me who has this damaged immune system, damaged gut, has does not have the thymic function. Can I use this and and prevent it? And the data is there. So there is, IDP was tested in a US lab. They tested it with influenza and adenovirus and COVID. So, more recently COVID, and they used actually lactoferrin as their control because they knew lactoferrin was actually a really good antiviral and it was better. So the IDP actually performed better than the vaccines at preventing these diseases.
Better than the
So
vaccines.
huge potential against viruses, but also bacteria. So another study looking at other pathogens like Staph aureus, those harmful organisms that are and IDP had a really good effect at killing off bacteria as well. In some cases, better than antibiotics at killing off bacteria. So now
And
when we look at
selectively too.
exactly, it didn't kill off any of the good
No,
bacteria,
the good.
right?
So it supports.
So none of the good bacteria, none of the good
Yep.
microbiome completely spared.
Yeah.
So now if we have somebody who has SIBO, for instance, or something like that, and we can give them IDP, so we're sparing instead of wiping out all their microbiome, giving them Xifaxan or something. Well, now I can actually selectively get rid of all the pathogens and protect and rebuild their gut health, which is going to be what honestly cures them, right? And not disturb their innate immune system pathogens, the good ones that are in there to help us. That's huge, and there's not a lot that does that, right?
No, and the reason, if you go back to Dr. Rod from Context said to me, if you think about it, that makes full sense, because in the cow they wanted to, they needed a product or a thing that would selectively take out the bad stuff and leave the good stuff, and that's evolved over 300 millennia, like however long mammals have been around evolving these types of things to actually kill the bad bacteria, and it supports lactobacillus specifically and bifidobacterium, which are two of the major species that we really
most important
need.
ones.
Yeah. And so that's IDP. So when Betsy and I were scouring the world for things to go after this immune senescence problem, because we're facing
that's what Lisa and I do. We think, God, wouldn't it be cool if, and then we go and see if the if
go so we can find someone who's doing that, find some crazy, amazing scientist who's done this, and go, finally, we found it, and we'll put this together with that, and then we'll do this. And that's what we've been doing actually for the last year and a half. And we've got a fabulous team of people behind us. Shout out to Peter and everyone at Longevity Launch for all the hard work that have been going into this. But we've gone and got IDP, and we've put it, then we went, okay, so we've ticked off some of the boxes of immunosenescence with this one product. We've lowered IL-6, we've lowered tumor necrosis factor alpha. These are two aging cytokines that increase with age. We've attacked that with IDP. What else have we done with
the gut? We've repaired the microbiome. We've restored the tight junctions in everywhere, lungs, brain, gut. So we've repaired all those, the integrity of the membranes. So we've gotten things in a really good place. What we're still kind of lacking was some of the more rich growth factors that were in the colostrum. Yep. So we still haven't, like you and I talked about, and there's not a replace. So that's why I started out saying, well, how do I fix the thymus gland? I can use bioregulators or thymus alpha 1, which is very difficult to get anymore.
Yeah, can't get much.
And so how do I fix the thymic problem? So what we found is that actually you could isolate out of colostrum as well some of these things like proline-rich peptide, which is a peptide that's really involved in thymic regulation. So PRP, or proline-rich peptide, is an immune modulating peptide found in the thymus gland. And then IGF-1, so insulin-like growth factor 1, those of you who know, that's basically when pituitary produces growth hormone, it stimulates the liver to produce IGF-1. Well, IGF-1, a lot of you guys know it in the sort of sports world for repair. I use it use a lot, can't get it now very easily, but for repairing tissue, bodybuilders will use it, inject it into muscles to grow muscles. So it's really important for tissue repair and rejuvenation, not a thymic peptide, but a pituitary hormone that tells the insulin-like growth factor, which is a peptide, be produced by the liver. Believe it or not, this components inside the colostrum actually contain IGF-1, because one of the other things that these babies need, these, you know, whether it's baby cow or baby humans, they need growth factors, right? So that's in there. And then something called transforming growth factor. So transforming growth factor is another immune enhancer. It's also it also acts interesting as a prebiotic. So transforming growth factor is a really important prebiotic. So now we've got a prebiotic. We have another thymic, immune modulating peptide in there, and it's also been really shown for brain function. So transforming growth factor, when it's elevated, appears to have a very neuroprotective effect as well. And then lastly, something called TGF alpha 2 or A2. There's a bunch of TGF, some good, some bad, but this A2 is a nucleotide that improves stamina and anti-aging. So these are all peptides that are inside of colostrum. And so we kind of think of them a little bit like bioregulator peptides, some of them. IGF is just its own peptide, PRP just its own peptide, but things like transforming growth factors, TGF, these are sort of thinking about them almost as bioregulators. So now we can actually help that other function, you know, that's inside the colostrum, if we can isolate those out. So just like what we can do with IDP by taking out all these bioactives that contain, you know, all these peptides and proteins that are helping to repair and helping the immune system. Well, let's actually go now to the other step that we missed, which is how do we help the thymus gland? And that's
the
incredible that we can now do that, right? So now we can actually do that. So when you look at the studies on this, you know, there's this product called Immuno that did exactly that. It isolated out the growth factors, the PRP, isolated out these peptides from colostrum, just like the bioactive ingredients. Now we've got these peptides, put those two together, and we have every component of colostrum that is meant to help us to grow and stay healthy. And the studies are there. I mean, there was a study done in mice that looked at streptococcus pneumonia and being using Immunel significantly within 24 hours cleared the strep pneumonia. 24 hours of Immunel.
Yep.
So, you know, mouse studies, but there's human studies on this too. So there's a couple of human studies showing its improvement. To go back and look them up, but we can give you that
pneumonia
data.
There's one on pneumonia. It got rid of 70% quicker than
antibiotics.
Yeah, so huge antiviral, antimicrobial, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory properties.
But also natural killer cells, right? And, so where are natural killer cells so important? Think about cancer.
Yeah.
Right. So it activates natural killer cells. Those are the ones that, number one, they're sort of our first response to invading pathogens, but also to cancer cells. So the natural killer cells are our first line soldiers against cancer cells. So basically, if you can upregulate natural killer cells, you're also going to be able to help reduce these. We're getting cancers all the time. You know, we every one of us has some cancer cells, but our body is really good at getting rid of them as long as our immune systems are healthy. So if I can restore natural killer cell function, so they actually looked at a marker called CD69 that you can measure in natural killer cells, and CD69 was significantly elevated with the use of Immunel. So now we have another thing, you know, and it makes sense that if I improve an immune function, I'm improving cancer function. But if I know directly that I'm having a direct effect, and I can measure, there is a direct effect on natural killer cells, I can, you know, this is something every cancer patient should be on, right? Exactly. You know, it also, when you looked at interleukin-2, when there's an immune response happening, so when our body's in an immune response, we produce a lot of IL-2. And IL-2 is one of the things that acts sort of in synergy to produce more natural killer cell activation. So there's also a big upregulation of IL-2. And that IL-2 is an indication that we are appropriately responding to these pathogens and to these cancer cells. So I think that
IL-7 was another one, I think.
And IL-7, right, which is, and so I think that we have markers here that we know we're on track with doing something really important with these. I think that the other kind of cool thing about adding the immunol in, we sort of talked about some of these things affect on as an anti-inflammatory agent. So one of the things, if I'm stimulating the immune system, am I creating a little bit of inflammation? Because when I stimulate the immune system, I have to get a little bit of a pro-inflammatory response. That's why there's also pro-inflammatory cytokines. So the really cool thing about immunel is that it has a selective inhibition of something called lipooxygenase enzymatic activity. And lipooxygenase is really upregulated when we stimulate the immune system. So there's a little bit of an inflammatory response. Now, if our body's really good, it can shut that inflammatory response off. But if our immune systems are not perfect, or if I just have some genetic influences that are detrimental to me, then sometimes my immune system stays turned on. That would be secondarily autoimmune disease, right? My immune system now has gone haywire and it's attacking things it shouldn't. So by blocking selectively, if you look at anti-inflammatory drugs, they some of them do block lipooxygenases, but they're also cyclooxygenase blockers. We don't want to do that because then you affect gut and things. But blocking lipooxygenase selectively has a really potent anti-inflammatory activity, but in a very safe way. So you're getting this anti-inflammatory benefit from these drugs. And when you have that, you're also reducing a lot of the free radical damage, right? So these oxidative free radicals that are produced as inflammatory response, if I activate if I inhibit the lipooxygenase, I don't get that additional free radical production that I would otherwise. So that's one of the really cool things about immunols. It also is an anti-inflammatory agent. So
it just hits all the damn boxes, really, doesn't it? It's like
right. Everything we didn't hit with the other bioactives,
with the IDP.
right? So now we've got all those. I think it's so cool that I could sort of give somebody IGF, that I can give somebody, all these, I use IGF, I can't get it anymore. Well, now I have a source for it. Or proline-rich peptide. Proline-rich peptide is very cool. There's nothing, you can't buy proline-rich peptide. It doesn't exist. But it's a really important peptide. So now I've got, so think of this as, here's 4 really cool peptides that are in this. And, people all love peptides. I love peptides. I preach peptides.
Yeah, and we can't get them anymore. That's so hard.
They're very hard to get, right? They're very hard to access. Here's an ingredient that contains 4 of the most important peptides for healing, for immune function, for recovery from injuries. So this is not just something to be thinking about for immune function, but also from recovery. So I think that really, and rapidly, and when you look at that study, I think you were talking about in the human study, it was like a really rapid response that in the data, the pneumonia study, I think it was
70%.
I think they looked at it like it was really, I think if I recall, the subjects were either given immuno or placebo, and they looked at blood samples 1 and 2 hours after consumption. Placebo did nothing. They saw a reduction in bacterial response 1 hour after getting this. It was that potent. And like I said, in the mouse study, 24 hours later, strep pneumonia was abolished in the mice. So this is a really potent immune modulating, not even modulating, I would say, immune helping agent. So I think that
this is going to replace so many of the products.
Replace so many things. That's what I sort of feel like. We've got this one thing finally that I can sort of take, where I've got this, I've got all these condensed peptides. I have all those bioactives. I mean, I have 2 kids who have IgA deficiencies, and meaning they get literally
I've got a brother with one.
They get sick a lot. And so I have to do a ton to support their immune system, or they are sick constantly. Any of you guys who have skin issues, these have been shown to be helpful in skin too, because if you're getting acne or skin issues, those are immune dysregulation. Those are gut dysfunction as well. And this product should be super helpful on some of those skin issues too, like acne and things like that.
Yep. We're actually looking at the topical side of it too.
Topical might be really useful in that realm. Yeah. So I think that, like as you and I talk, we're like, oh my God, here, let's condense all this stuff. What if you put it together, right? So now I've got the bioactives, I've got the immuno supporting all these growth factors, supporting my thymic function, helping to reduce inflammation. And I've got bioactives who are completely restoring all my gut integrity and restoring the T cell function and B cell function and natural killer cell function. Then I've got sort of a gold on my hands. So like I said, there, I may be right now having to take 6 different things to do this.
Which we do. Yeah. up until now, you and I have been taking, and in our clinics using
Yeah.
different things to cover all these bases.
To
And
cover all these
now,
bases, right?
yeah, that's why we're so excited about it. And like when I put in this into mum, because mum's my impetus for all my research, I saw her lymphocyte count go up for the first time in 3 years because we've been
Yeah.
battling,
Right.
your
Wow.
mum's physician,
Yeah.
you've seen her,
Right.
cancer story, and her lymphocyte count plummet, especially after the bisphosphonates, the hip break that
Yeah. Right.
dropped her to point
And
two, and
COVID.
then
Then she
and
got COVID
COVID
again. That,
and
yeah.
E. coli and gastrointestinal bleeding and you name it. Like she's meant to have been dead 10 times over, and if it wasn't for you, Betsy, she would be. So you just saved her life so many times. But we saw her lymphocyte count go up for the first time. Like we've been
Right. And
struggling
that's the
to
first
point.
time after doing all the other stuff we know to do, right?
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
like,
exactly.
it didn't really budge. It kind
Nothing's
of
working.
kept it ish. It didn't get worse, but we could not boost it. And yeah, to see that go up, kind of into the normal range for the first
Yeah.
time, right? It was the first time we saw it
1.3
go into
we
kind
got
of a
it up
normal
to.
range. Yeah.
Yep.
Significant. This is the first thing that did that. And I think it's because we're doing things the way, I mean, most of the things we're throwing in are trying to fix one little problem. We're now working at the cellular level at the exact way the body was designed to do this. That's what's so compelling to me is if people wanted the body is smart, the cell is smart. Let's retreat it the way it was designed, and it does get better.
Yep. And then we were looking, okay, we've covered off all of these things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that are related to the immune system. And then we were like, what else are we still missing? And then we went back to the Stanford Immunomes project, the 1000 Immunomes project. And they'd picked out a number of markers there that were specifically, so chemokines that were, if those are high, then your immune system is going all right. Basically, that's what they
Right.
identified. And one of those ones was CXCL9 and CXCL1, 2, and 3, but especially the CXCL9.
CXCL9, right? That was the most critical marker that they found. So if you could find something that sort of, is inhibiting CXCL9, could we really support the immune function?
And so then you started looking into the literature and you were like, well, there's a couple of drugs, but there's not much natural things that can really lower CXCL9 until we discovered something called rosemary extract or carnosic acid, which is a part of the rosemary plant, which has been used for thousands of years. And this is another big New Zealand product that
right.
And funnily enough, because we have this ozone hole, apparently our soils and our plants create more of the important ingredients in these plants.
Nosic acid, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Super interesting, right?
Yeah.
If you look at some of the rosemary grown here versus in New Zealand, it has a very different component of this, and so it's not nearly as effective. And again, there's not really, I mean, you have to dig hard and wide to find CXCL9 inhibitors. There's a lot of things that, are TNF alpha inhibitors and IL-6 inhibitors. There's not a lot of CXCL9 inhibitors. You have to kind of look far and wide. So we thought, okay, if the Immuno project shows that this is one of the most important things, how are we going to attack that? I suspect that the Immuno and IDP are going to do something just naturally to lower that. But if we threw some rosemary extract in there as well, are we now addressing a big, huge thing that seems to be equated to immune aging or immune dysfunction?
Yep.
Yeah. And again, especially coming from a source that we know is much higher in bioavailability than any other source of it.
Yeah, so that's why we put carnosic acid into this formulation, which will tell you the name of the formulation in a minute. So that was the third ingredient that we looked at. And then we went, okay, so we've covered off now every damn thing. What are we still missing? And then we were looking at interleukin 10, which is an anti-inflammatory cytokine that goes down with age. So all of these things are going, so the pro-inflammatory stuff's going up as we age, the anti-inflammatory stuff's going down, and we found that IL-10.
That's what happens. You guys, that's not just age too. That's autoimmune disease. That's, that's people, once you get a virus, why you get long COVID or you don't get better, is that your body doesn't turn off the inflammatory side and bring up the anti-inflammatory side. So you'll see that and there's people who just genetically have lower levels of these things. That's probably people who get sicker, but even a lot of the viruses, one of the things COVID does is you'll see big drops in interleukin 10. So that's a really, you've got to raise up this anti-inflammatory side while we're suppressing the pro-inflammatory side. So that those have to be in balance. You don't want to have no inflammation. You need some inflammation, but you need to be able to react appropriately to block the anti-inflammatory cytokines.
Yeah.
So
So,
yeah, so
so
that's
we
where we
came
started
up with
searching on that.
so searching on that, and then we were also looking at NF kappa B, which is sort of like at the top of the cascade of the cytokine tree, if you like, that
Right.
affects a lot of the other cytokines down, and it sort of works on a more at a genetic level. And we came across kawa, which is like, I'm of Maori descent. I'm a New Zealander. I'm from Maori descent. My dad was Maori, and traditionally our people have used kawa for hundreds of years as a medicinal plant. It's a taonga. It's a known in our language as a treasure. This plant, right, and it's used for so many medicinal purposes. And then when we started to look into it, we thought, okay, I'm really interested in traditional medicines, because I think that when we go and look at, like some of the traditional medicines that are panaceas for things, we start to see, oh, when we actually look at it from a modern day science point of view, and we actually start to test what are the bioactives in this plant, is why it's actually working, then the modern science starts to validate some of the traditional stuff, and we're seeing this more and more, which is really, really exciting.
Right. Right. These didn't just come into existence out of somebody, it took a lot of years of people figuring this out, like the old witch doctors. They didn't just, these things actually had to work, that, because they tried them on people, either you died or you got better, and so they basically, they went right through the experimental stage. They didn't have to bypass all the safety stages. They basically just went through the experimental stages of this. I want to clarify, because, I didn't know much about kawaka, and don't, you guys, here in the US, you're going to think it's kava because we use a lot of kava here.
No,
it's not
no.
kava. So kawa is a very different entity. It's known as a
KAWA.
macroperoxism, like KAW, and it's not available here. It's a strictly New Zealand and very specific. You have to only get it right from, and it has to be like harvested at some specific time.
Yeah, the specific time of the month. So at full moon, it's harvested. And, when we dive into the folklore of that as to why they did it, and they believe that the extracts were more powerful. And science is starting to look at that now as not being completely woo-woo.
Right. It's not hogwash. There's something to that, right?
Yeah. And I think they need more studies on that, but it's an interesting story that the place where we get our kawa is only harvested at full moon, and apparently it affects the water levels in the plant, and therefore the extracts in somehow some way.
Right, they truly found it to be a more effective extract when it's done this way.
Yeah.
So it's cool. I mean, I have I have a son who's very much a philosopher, and and there is something to these energies that are around us, and that they do, those are important. And I think that this is one of the, I love this, because
It's a cool
maybe
story,
it's a little too woo for some of the science side. There is something to that. The science can only explain so much, and there's beyond that. And I think that when you look at some of these very interesting things, that this sort of spiritual aspect of things sometimes does play a role. So I think we sort of even covered that base with this, that we're pulling something that's
well, I like the ancient traditions, because
right, the ancient tradition of stuff. Yeah, these, again, guys, these
my dad used to use this all the time when we were kids. And I make a tea out of it every day out of my garden, and and in looking at the whole full moon thing. I mean, if you think the effect it has on the tides, I live 2 minutes from the beach, and it's massive. So why would
right? So of course, water is going to be, you're going to have more water and things, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure the scientific explanations to the
we'll catch
to the spiritual aspect, but
it'll catch up one day. But we looked at kawa for its actual extracts and looked at the actual science, and it raises really markedly the interleukin 10, which was another piece of that immune.
Right, so it lowered, and its big effect on nuclear factor kappa beta too was huge. And that the NFKB, because you guys, if you look at that cascade of cytokines, NFKB is up here, cytokines are all down here. If you block NFKB, you're sort of regulating all the cytokines across the board. So now we've addressed, so we already talked about, okay, now we've got gut integrity and gut health, and we've got thymic health by all these thymic peptides that we put in there. And now we have, let's get rid of these inflammatory cytokines and upregulate the anti-inflammatory cytokines. And now we have sort of the perfect thing to keep you healthy. And if I can truly state that the immune system is at the root of all those other things that you guys are doing, it should fix a lot of things underneath, as opposed to addressing all the things underneath and then hoping the immune system gets better.
And then the key thing of our formulation was that I wanted something, because again, going back to mum, I wanted something for my mum, right? I wanted something that was safe for fragile people who I can't put everything into mum's regime because she's very sensitive and very fragile, and she has a lot of
Right? And she's only going to
comorbidities.
swallow so many pills, and it's like,
Yeah. And so this is a formulation that is safe for everyone, basically.
right.
There is nobody who is not going to benefit from it. There is no contraindications. There's no, safety factors. It's got a really good safety profile, all
Right.
of these ingredients. And so that was another key factor for me, because I want something that could help everybody from our babies to our elderly, and not be a problem. Because when you look at it, some of the stuff that we give people, even in the supplement side of things, it can be quite taxing on their system as well, and you can't put everything in. And when you start to combine lots and lots of things, which I've been guilty of in the past, because of, like
you
there's so
actually
many
can create
great
more
things.
harm than good.
Yeah. So it's one way of peeling back the onion and getting down to the basics, getting down to that cellular level and finding a formulation that hits all this immunosenescence, which we were going after, the aging of the immune system, and ticking all of this 1, 2, 3, 4 with these 4 ingredients as we've just, gone through. And so Betsy and I then went, okay, well, we better get this to market now. So we've just launched a company called Aevum Labs. That's AEVUM, Aevum Labs. And it's really key to have, because I knew a lot of this, but I didn't know all of it. And, to get your scientific expertise, because you really are the master of pathways, and, to be able to put all these pieces together is really, really key for us. And so we're really excited. We've got Rejuvenate coming out on the market now, and we'll put all the information below about what you can do, where you can get it, all of that sort of good stuff. And Betsy, is there anything else that we missed off on the science side of things? Did I cover it all?
I think we got it pretty covered. Yeah. I mean, I will tell you guys, I think this sort of stemmed from a, this is so cool. Let's see if we can find it and put it together. And kudos to Lisa and her team for successfully doing that. And I sort of sat in the background and did the research, but this is going to be, I'm super excited because, number one, I, from even a selfish perspective, I have an autoimmune disease. I've got 2 kids who have immune problems. I've got 5 kids and 2 of them are sick constantly unless I do something really supportive to them. So from a selfish perspective, but also from my patient's perspective. And that's the nice thing is, I always consider, my clinic, my Boulder Longevity Institute clinic is my laboratory. And as much as I do a lot of lecturing and teaching and other things, I will never give up my laboratory because it allows me to really test things on people. So, we'll continue to be keeping you updated on what we're finding on people. Hopefully we'll actually start, really seeing, because we look at markers, we can look at all these things and sort of see the improvement. Right now we sort of have the N of 1 with Lisa's mom, but we know that, we know that Colostrum's a good product. There's a lot of data. Well, if we made Colostrum super powered, which is what we've done, there's no doubt in my mind it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I use a lot of colostrum right now in my patients, and they will all be, I can tell you guys, all be switched over to this.
Switching over for sure. Betsy, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah,
this
thanks,
has been a fabulous ride. I hope we didn't lose everybody in the science. Listen to it a couple of times over, because when we start rabbiting on, we do get carried away a little bit, but I think we nailed it. So thanks for your time today, Betsy.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Thanks so much for watching, and we hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, hit the notification bell and subscribe, and of course share it with just one person who you think could really benefit from this content. Click here to watch last week's episode, and click here for my website, and click here to watch a video you may not have seen yet.